Right now.
Right.
Tom McKay here with 3D Politics. We're finally starting to roll in the landscape. I've got all three Davids. That's what the D stands for in 3D. David Van, David Oldham, and David D'Ambroso. The three Davids that matter right here in Oklahoma to talk about all things politics, cultural, and important. Van, start us off with the weather information because nobody's heard enough about the weather recently.
Oh man, you know, back in '86, I remember the day well. We had something similar. So Oklahoma has had a rainy spring, and all of our reservoirs in most of the watershed, that word watershed, for half of Kansas and the northern half of Oklahoma all comes through Muskogee, and most of that by way of Tulsa. And our wonderful people at the Army Corps of Engineers has their favorite fan here. Dan.
Oh, man. Am I ever upset?
Tell us.
Well, if you stop and think about it, every bit of flooding that we have right now is man-caused. They could have let everything out early and had the lakes at a manageable level, because this is the very beginning of the rainy season. We've got unusually high amount of snowpack in the Rockies. We know that I traced it out the other day. It took me a few minutes, and I traced out near Pueblo, Colorado, as the headwaters of the Arkansas River. And a week or two ago, I was talking to a friend about it, and I was saying, well, they've got to be releasing a lot more water than they are. And they are the ones that are doing this day in and day out, and they should have been releasing much, much more, but they were loath to release more than 65,000 cubic feet per minute up until just a week or so ago.
And they had several days notice.
But here's the point. They have models that they should have known that weather was coming. They should have just known. I mean, come on. Poor Richard's almanac could have predicted what was going to come.
Your Honor, I object.
They're so far behind the eight ball because they didn't release enough early enough. If they were at 150,000 cubic feet per second.
I want to know the numbers are boring me.
Going back to 1986, because we had a similar scenario. And I looked at some videos on the Army Corps of Engineers YouTube page last night, and the colonel that's in charge says, we do not do anticipatory pre-releases. And I tell you why. He says, because we've gotten burned. And in '86, that was a similar situation. We had rains coming in, and they knew they're coming in. You're right, David. They know.
They knew it was going to rain.
They know when the rainy season is, and I'd say we're more through the rainy season than at the beginning of it. But here's what happened in '86 is we had a bunch of rain further southeast, and there was flooding going on down in Sallisaw and in Fort Smith and that, and they held back water. And then within a few days, now this was in the fall rainy season, October, then all of a sudden they got a deluge further up. We're talking Enid, Ponca City, Garden City, all that. And they said, oh my God, we've been hanging on to too much, thinking we're trying to do a favor for folks downstream. Now, within 3 days, by their numbers, they said, we are going to overtop. And that could bring about a catastrophic failure. Goodbye, Tulsa. Okay? And so they had to release, and they get this, they gave us basically 24 hours notice. They said, we think it may flood the Jinx levees as well as the Sand Springs levees. And we had 1 day, because they were kicking out 305,000 cubic feet per second. Now we're about 10% below that right now. So anyway, their thing is, if you think rain's coming above the dam and you release a bunch, and then all of a sudden that weather pattern, which is so unpredictable, just 10, 15 miles, and now it's dumping below the dam, you just added to the flooding. They said that's a very real scenario
Well,
for
you know,
them.
the way I heard it is that didn't really matter because the Corps of Engineers had a plan to construct a large boat and evacuate the populace in the metro area on that craft.
And how many cubits was this boat?
I'm not sure. I don't think they used cubits back then.
Sculptor would,
Really
right?
gotta, really gotta hand
They
it
used
to
forearms.
them. There it is.
Well,
Yeah.
that would be a cubit.
So, does that make any sense to you, David?
Well, I can understand that, but the thing is that if you don't pre-release, and we were 18 feet over when I saw it, and we were
cubits.
talking about 18 feet over full, and that was still well below where we're at now, which was like 30 some feet over full.
The bigger issue here is because everybody has to take the percentages, take the numbers, and make a calculated call. So you could have been the person that was in charge of making the call, and maybe you would have made a better call. The bottom line is they cannot predict the weather. They
What are
don't
those
know
100-year
what's going to
models based
happen.
on?
They don't know what's going to happen yesterday, today, tomorrow, and global warming is a hoax because they don't know what's going to happen.
Well, threw that in there.
Well,
for you.
yeah.
well, the
It's
thing is,
extra.
the
Trying
thing
to lead
is
it up.
that these things should have been better foreseen. We are at a record watershed. To my understanding, we're at a record watershed, and so therefore, to hoard water when we have record runoff is ridiculous, and especially when and I think I'm borne out by the very fact of how it's gone on. Because we not only have the Arkansas, we have the Neosho, we have the Illinois, we have all the other rivers as well that are all piling in. And that's why you see all the damage down in Fort Gibson and Muskogee, because that's where they all converge.
Yeah.
The thing is that they didn't do any one of them correct. If they had just kept even just one of them lower, they would be in better shape than they are right now. And my point is, we've got snow in the Rockies in May. Hello, we've got water for the rest of the year, no problem.
So
Sounds
about
like
one more
global
minute.
cooling.
Yeah. Let's wrap this up. About one more minute on the weather. We're going to take a quick moment for station identification, and then and wrap it up. What else do you want to say about the weather there, David?
That would be you.
Oh no, yeah, we're all named David here.
It's a safe bet.
It's like
for me.
being at church. If someone says David,
Everybody's
and
in
a third
trouble.
of the men turn around, you know.
So I understand you're in the insurance business. You must love this, right?
Well, a lot of insurance companies just get up and leave when there are big storms like this.
Nice answer.
I don't do PNC.
Nice
So
return.
I need to do PNC because I've got some leaks in here.
Oh.
In any case, no, I mean, it sounds like global cooling to me. It's very interesting. That was the theory. That was the climate change theory before global warming. In the 1950s and 60s was global cooling, then it became global warming, and now it's simply climate change. Now it's simply a reflection of the fact that we have seasons. But, you know, the great consensus of scientists, the clergy of public trust, okay, these fellas that wear the white lab coats, they promised us that in the early 1990s, LA and New York would be underwater due to rising ocean levels.
Yes.
And so I haven't been there lately. Is that the case? Are they underwater?
Well,
Unfortunately not.
I've got a liberal cousin who works for a congressman. He's his legislative director, and he said, it's proven, the stats are there. And I said, show me the stats. So we looked at it, and get this, since 1860, the water level of the Atlantic Ocean has risen to the effect that by now, the Atlantic is 6 inches higher than it was in 1860. And I said, you mean New York City can't build a 6-inch curb? We got to change our way of life because they don't want to build a curb.
We continue to deny the whole system is a closed system anyway.
Yeah.
You know, the water really isn't going anywhere. Hey, we're going to take just a quick second to know who we are, where we are. We got David Van here with SoonerPolitics.org. We've got David Oldham here also with Constitutional Grounds, and David D'Ambroso. You can find him all over Facebook. He's causing trouble, trolling right and left. Isn't that right? About right?
No.
No.
I don't
He's
do that.
occasionally on talk radio.
Occasionally on talk radio. that's correct.
DavidDambroso.com and all their stuff. I hate plugging that. That's the worst part of the show for me. So.
The thing is, it's not a plug because you're really not getting anything out of it.
That's true. That is a great point.
That's true. We got to figure out some way to get
the
It's
feedback.
even less of a benefit than plugging.
The feedback is 4 out of 5 dentists, want to know more about you. So
I want to keep them wanting to know more. I'm a private citizen.
I'm just saying
I'm traveling.
that I am doing my focus group research, and people ask me, how do I find out more about where these guys are coming from?
Go to the YMCA.
So we're going to move into this article called Booby Trap. This eco warrior has glued her breast to the road. You probably
It's
heard
his
about
story, dudes. Not mine.
I'm glad I didn't read this.
It's actually a pair of stories. But there's 1,000 people were arrested here on April 15th. Not here, in London, actually. And one specific gal glued her breast to the road to let everybody
Very
know
brave.
about the climate emergency. And while that seems laughable, what I heard recently from a brilliant man was that during secular times, the government becomes your religion because it's the most powerful force known to man. If there is no God above government, then government is your God. And what is happening here, you can answer the question of why would a woman glue her breasts in martyr style in order to save the planet? It's because it is her religion. She has martyred her and her breasts in order to save what she thinks is the most important thing, and that is her religion, the worship of the planet.
Yeah.
How many virgins do her breasts get in the afterlife? Is there any?
If you want to be
Text on
sure,
that.
yeah, okay.
I'm just glad to see leftists embracing religion of any form.
I think she blew both of them.
And yeah,
Disagree, David.
Well,
but she's embracing the asphalt.
That's what I call it.
But David, mind you, they have always embraced religion. It's just been which form of religion they embrace.
State
Well,
religion.
but you take another story that's come out very similar, where the leftists are on an agenda. Is we've got Georgia just passed a bill basically making abortion illegal, no excuses.
The whole idea, don't kill babies.
Right. And all of a sudden, Alyssa Milano, some used-to-be actress, decided that abstinence is an effective form of getting the desired outcome.
That's a good way to threaten Christian fundamentalists with abstinence.
So now you've got somebody radical right, left, now saying abstinence is the ideal way to get our agenda. And now I just remember when
you're gonna get Christian fundamentalists out there saying sex for life, sex for life.
Yeah, so because they've always got abstinence.
She
doesn't
agrees
work.
with like George Bush's sex education regimen. Apparently, abstinence is the answer.
Yeah, abstinence doesn't work except when we're the ones protesting. Then it's okay.
When Alyssa Milano said she was going to boycott sex with me, I was unaffected.
That's true. President Bush Sr. was with Bill Clinton one day. They were talking to auto dealers convention, and it wasn't Clinton that told the story, but it was Bush Sr. that said they had just this big ruling on the Webster case, Missouri, back then, and all of a sudden he had to leave to go to some event, and Secret Service said, we're going to take you out the east entrance here kind of secretly. We'll run a decoy car out the main entrance. And they thought it worked, but all of a sudden somebody got tipped off and he's pulling out the east entrance, and all of a sudden a mob of old ladies come up, and a big old woman, she was about as mean and nasty and ugly looking as they get, and she pounds on the door and she says, stay out of my womb. And he told these auto dealers, I said, lady, no problem here. Bill Clinton got up to give us speeches. You see, now he can tell that story. I can't tell that story.
I noticed that was the only time that Joe Biden kept his hands to himself when he was on stage with Hillary.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. What do we got, Tom?
Well, I wanted to bring
yes.
that up. I mean, I love all this other stuff, but I wanted to bring it up because what it said to me was just how far people on the other side will go to make their point. And I see conservatives and constitutionalists and those of us who want to remonstrate with decorum, who want to to have our grievances heard, but we want to have it with decorum. And you know what? It's getting us nowhere. And I'm wondering how many of us need to glue our breasts to the ground in order to get our actual legitimate grievances heard.
We have to change our tactics.
A couple of my buddies did. Well, they were football players, and it was a freshman. They glued his butt to the locker, but that's different.
So, without hazing, is there a way forward without hazing? I don't know.
Yeah. But, you got a great point, because several of us who are more passionate on the right have been told by our more proper and respectable conservatives that our activism is embarrassing them. And yet, you see on the left, they all seem to kowtow to the most radical edge right now. If you don't believe it, look at the 23 Democrats who are running for president, and they're all fighting each other to see who can be more radical.
Yeah.
Well, and the typical Democrat debate goes like this: I have done more for abortion than you have.
Yes.
And then the other one says, no, I have, and then they both try to prove it.
Who can love abortion and hate the Constitution the most?
The question becomes, who has killed the more babies? Yeah. Who has more blood on their hands?
Who can virtue signal more?
Virtue signal more in whatever the issue. Yeah. But the point is that we're not looking for that. I mean, let's face it. If we have a constitutional grievance, we are injured, actually injured, and some people actually physically injured, and they are not being heard. What is it going to take to get them heard and get actual justice for once? Because it's not happening now.
We have to change our tactics without changing the message. And, I encourage everyone who's a conservative to read Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. You can use those tactics without at all abandoning your principles.
Yes.
One big one is, make your opponent play by their own rules.
Right.
You know, so here's easy. You want to break a liberal? Well, how can someone be a misogynist if gender is only a social construct? You say both things. How can they both be true? I guess there are no misogynists. I guess we agree, since gender's a social construct, that there can't be, they disagree with themselves all the time.
Yes.
But they're never held to account on it because of their stranglehold in the media.
Well,
and
I find
and
that
they have no shame.
And I find that interesting because AOC has now been held to account for the world's going to end in 12 years, basically. and she says, well, if you can't understand dry humor, then you can't. You can't.
It's like Swalwell when he said he was going to nuke the Americans that weren't going to give up their guns. He said he was just joking.
Right. Well, and
just a joke, guys.
There's a proverb about that. But the thing is that they get caught, and the thing is, she got it from someplace. It was the UN, and the UN is dead serious on this 12-year thing. So the thing is that
even if she didn't back up on it, no one's going to remember in 12 years because the public memory is incredibly short.
Yes, it is.
And leftists are held to a different standard. I mean, once again, we already stated all of the climate projections have been wrong. All the catastrophic predictions from a number of PhD researchers, the consensus of them from the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s have not come true. Al Gore famously said that we were Dunskies. And a timeline that was already passed years ago, based upon climate change. So we can see that it doesn't matter what they say, and they know that. You and I and the average conservative would be shamed, would feel a deep sense of moral obligation if we were simply lying to people, or saying things that were untrue, or making catastrophic predictions that didn't occur. We'd be too embarrassed probably to go in public. Not for the left. And there's a lot of data on this. Jonathan Haidt he's a pretty really left guy, honestly. And he conducted research that indicates that conservatives on average are far more polite than leftists. So a leftist doesn't mind, streaking, bearing all, doing all these, these making these outlandish statements, whereas a conservative is deeply embarrassed by these things. Because those that are embarrassed in public for others, you know, you see someone in the class and they ask a really embarrassing question that everyone might know the answer to, or people might consider to be a stupid question, although there are no stupid questions, right? Except there are. And you feel embarrassed for that person.
Yes.
You're a high empathy individual. You're far more likely to be a conservative than a liberal and say, oh yeah, there's no shame in, you know, asking, hey, are we supposed to, you know, use the restroom before we come to class, or how does this work? Is it okay right here? You know, you'd be embarrassed for that person. Whereas a leftist would say, wow, they're just free urinating. That's beautiful.
Typically, a socialist prioritizes the group above your personhood, and so they're interested in controlling the person. So socialists typically want to control what you're doing, and that's what makes them want to go where they're going.
Makes them social.
And I would like to say, rather than having it left-right, although it tends to go that way, I would like to have us change our thinking to tyranny versus liberty, because that's the real issue. Because on the right, we have tyrants who do the exact same thing as the leftists. And we typically call those rhinos. But the thing is, we typically call those rhinos. But the thing is, are they really, or is that really the heart of the Republican Party at times? And we need to acknowledge that at times the Republican Party is dead wrong when it comes to the Constitution and liberty.
Yeah.
How many viewers we got, Dave? Anybody know?
We have 12.
12. Hey, everybody. You're the jury.
We'll have more later when it gets shared.
Just 12.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you're listening to Tom McKay, the host of 3D Politics. I've got all three Davids, the Davids that matter here in Oklahoma. David Van, David Oldham, and David D'Ambroso. We're talking about all these. You know, in London, they cleared London out 3 times due to fear of flooding back in the 1700s. They all this the same mongering of weather fear. Yeah, same thing happened.
Yeah, Lord Malthus famously said that everyone was going to starve to death after the population hit 1 billion. You know, in 1700. Wow.
There's an article I've got here from 2013, April 25th, by Elizabeth Howe from the Live Science Contributor. They had just discovered, I'm really surprised at AOC, who says that abortion is just basic science, even though she doesn't know she's pregnant for a full 6 weeks. Apparently, that ought to get some viewers. But they just have learned since 2013 the temperature, the melting point of iron. So they're realizing now that iron melts at about 1,000 degrees hotter than they had earlier thought, which means that all of their temperature readings are off by 1,000 degrees for at least 20 years. So if we're going to be consistent and logical, let's use science. We all understand that there was a consensus of scientists that came together for 1,000 years to decide that iron melts at a certain temperature. But we just found out they were wrong, and that should have been big news, because that's going to impact our numbers pretty heavily.
Well, and here I hate this phrase "settled science." Like we know it all.
That completely ignores the entire concept of science and empiricism.
Exactly.
It's never settled. We just simply have observations.
Well, whether it's vaccines, or whether it's melting point of iron, whether it's climate change, whether it's whatever the issue, other issues of medicine or scientific endeavor, so much of it is actually still only theory.
Physics is a lot of it is settled according to temperature versus pressure.
In theory.
In theory, pressure always increases temperature.
Except it's not settled. Because on the quantum level, the rules are completely different.
We still call it the theory of relativity, and we now have string theory and so forth to explain missing segments of the theory.
Before you get into the weeds, though, we live in a closed atmospheric system that is pressurized by approximately 1 atmosphere. If you increase the atmospheric pressure, you increase the temperature. So they're asking us to control the temperature of the Earth, which is flying through 0.27 Kelvin out there in space, which is 2 degrees above absolute zero.
Yeah.
And the Earth's
That's before we got into the weeds.
The
guys.
Earth's core, according to Elizabeth Howe, Life Science contributor, Earth's core 1,000 degrees hotter than expected. The center of the Earth is approximately as hot as the surface of the sun.
Yeah, but Tom,
Makes sense to me.
in what other cultural context do we consider the know-it-all, the smug, to be a virtue to our society? Especially should not be so in education. The hunger to learn more, to find out, to challenge everything. Those are things we've always encouraged in our youth.
Especially when the know-it-all's wrong consistently.
Well, and
These
we
folks,
have
they're
to-
wrong all of the time.
Well, and we have to look to history. It has been the scientific heretic who turned out to be right, and it was the majority who were oppressing
Science
the heretic,
is not-
even to death, that were wrong.
Yeah.
It's not a
and we have
democracy.
more of the same today.
Right.
Yeah,
I mean, all around us.
You should always, and I'll go back to scripture, as iron sharpens iron, so man sharpens man. You never want to suppress open challenging and dialogue, because it makes you a sharper, better person. We know in the business world with competition makes for better product. You know, anytime you try to suppress that, anytime, whether it's competition, whether it's ideas, any of that, it doesn't help society. And I'm not talking in a religious or political sense right now. I'm much broader than that.
Even economic. I mean, you want to talk about people who failed because they didn't get with the times. Look at JCPenney and Sears Roebuck. Mm-hmm. They got outpaced by Amazon and Walmart and others who were doing the exact same thing, but they modernized while the others didn't. And I mean, you've got example after example after example.
Right.
It doesn't matter what pick a subject to somebody write in and tell us a subject, we can pick it apart.
I can point to 30 shopping centers within 5 miles of us that prove that point.
Sure.
You know, anytime you think you've arrived and you aren't ready for the next big thing, you're just a matter of time.
Well, but part of my point was they tried to use the governmental force to keep others from competing.
Right.
And it ended up that somebody found a way to nonetheless compete.
Yeah.
We're seeing it with taxi cabs, with Uber and Lyft. They're not able to compete anymore, and you're going to see
And they use
the medallion prices go down.
They use the leverage that they have to kick Uber and Lyft out of New York City.
And using government regulation to do it.
And, you know, whenever you use that implement, you know, don't be surprised when that weapon's picked up and wielded against you.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what are we seeing here? What are we seeing elsewhere where Uber and Lyft are allowed?
Okay.
Much better service.
When long distance phones were deregulated, it was about $1.10 a minute to use your landline phone just to call 30 miles away.
Right.
Okay. Deregulation did what? You know, as consumers,
It made using the phone dangerous. Many
In
people
fact-
died after using the phone.
There's this little obscure airline back in the 70s called Pan Am. And the CEO was on the Phil Donahue show, and he said, as long as there is regulation of our airlines, Pan Am will always be the biggest. The next biggest was TWA. Where are those two today? Or
I think
Eastern
both
Airlines.
Long Trip and Howard Hughes are dead because they used a long distance phone.
So yeah, I love open competition.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
The point I was trying to bring home is that
you had a point. I'm sorry.
right here, top of my head.
Before the weeds. It's in front of it.
The global warming hoax, the religion
Yeah.
of global warming, strikes right at your home. They don't want you to mow your lawn when they predict tomorrow's going to be an ozone day.
Mm-hmm.
And an ozone day is hardly provable.
Well, no, that's a lot. Well, no,
I thought it was a settled science.
an ozone day is a lot more local. That is not global warming.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay,
theory.
They can monitor the
Ozone
O3
They're
molecule.
actually measuring.
So the ozone day occurs at the point when the ozone hole opens up. And
No.
No.
You know what? It's not your fault on this.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's two kinds of ozone.
The point is, they predicted
There's the high atmosphere
before.
global ozone. That's the thinning at the north-south.
You're afraid to bore them any more than you're boring me. They act like oracles, okay?
Exactly.
They predict the ozone day the day before. They don't wait until the ozone day has affected, then they tell you, hey, we got an ozone.
Well, the main thing is,
They guess ahead of time.
To your point,
Like an oracle. It's a joke.
Yeah, it's pretty scientific. They can predict it with some. I mean,
They
go to Los
so it
Angeles
is
and
an
tell me
ozone
what
day.
local.
So what is an ozone day? I'm going to mow my lawn. It's not going to affect the Earth flying at 66,000.
I'm going to burn all my tires on that day.
All the way through
Can't tell me what to
2
do.
degrees space. It's just not going to make an effect.
Yeah, it's not that big a deal. But you know, if you got a neighbor,
I get all worked up about
you got
that.
a neighbor with asthma, they
gotta have
might
my
have a
biogun.
problem.
Sure, they're sure
Well,
they
it's
do.
it's more pointing to that you're going to have a lowered smog level, and people are going to have trouble breathing.
He's lived up
It's a
California.
libertarian thing.
as a libertarian, I'm gonna have my Mad Max Thunderdome event in my backyard
we'll
on an
talk about
ozone
that.
day
Let's
or
hear
not.
Yeah, it's a libertarian thing. If I want to mow my lawn,
I don't know if that's liberty or just plain selfishness.
I just want to mow my
Well, no,
You're
this,
just a jerk,
well,
Tom.
no,
I am.
this isn't
Damn
an
straight.
issue. And let's talk. Since I did come from California, in Southern California, I'm fairly well aware
Welcome
of
to
the
the United
history.
States.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. The LA basin had smog long before there were any motorized anything.
Heresy.
Okay, no, came
Burn
from,
him.
came
I was
from
in Canova
campfires
Park for
and
the
things like that.
1971 earthquake, so I know exactly what
Okay,
you're talking about.
so the Indians had smog because of their campfires and
Native
things like
peoples.
that. The problem is I can't think of the layer that's
San
called-
Gabriel Mountains.
Well, no, the
or-
layer that holds the smog in,
Yeah.
the climatological layer, and I can't think of the name of it all of a sudden, but it holds stuff down close to the ground, and it causes problems. Well, they have even more now that they have more smog,
More
and
people.
more people,
Yeah.
and so that can have an effect on people. And yes, and because you can predict weather to a certain degree, you can predict whether or not people with breathing problems are going to have
Well,
problems.
and this idea is back to the point that's been made earlier. It is very religious, the left's adherence to climate change, because they have these feelings that aren't objective reality. They're not empirical science. You can't say for certain that this climate change is
Right.
happening or that it will be catastrophic. We have, the problem with a lot of these scientists is that they're not doing science. They're not following the scientific method.
Yeah.
They're doing something that's a facsimile science, but it's very religious in its construction because it says, here's the apocalyptic event, and here's how you might be saved.
Yeah.
Sacrifice your economy
And-
as the altar of the
okay,
Paris
that's right.
Treaty. The
Now,
Kyoto
one more thing to add to that is their ulterior motives, because when you do these global agreements and somehow there's a carve out for China, for instance, which has the worst pollution problems, and they're exempted, it is a means, if I could quote a famous leftist, never let a good crisis go to waste. Waste for what? For your leftist agenda.
Right.
So that's the other thing that's on there is what's motivating them. They claim it's environment. It isn't always
And there's
just environment.
inherent corruption because, Al Gore's made $500 million since he started flying around in a
right.
private jet, throwing more carbon in the atmosphere than this entire city block does. Per trip, so there are people that are making money on this in carbon trading.
Well, and
it's a
let's
redistributed
not
method.
conflate what local pollution to the global hoax.
Yeah.
Because those are two different
Right.
things.
Yeah.
And we have to be careful. I mean, we did clean up acid rain,
Yeah.
and that came
And
from
that was
specific events.
occurring even before the EPA was created. So before Nixon
Well,
created the EPA,
nobody's saying the EPA did
corporations
it.
Who cleaned up acid rain?
Well, it certainly wasn't the EPA.
Was it government?
It was actually cooperation between government and industry, but government had to force industry. Yes, government did have to. Force
I have to say, billions or millions of automobiles no longer having leaded gas. Yeah, that might do something.
that helped as well.
Yeah.
The thing is that there is a place, and this is what we have to remember. We do not have the right to pollute the air, the water, the
Agree.
land
I
of our
totally
neighbors.
agree with that.
And that is that is where we when we acknowledge that, that's fine.
Yeah.
When it goes overboard and people are worshiping the men in robes, the white coats, and placing their children and other things up on the altar, whether it be the medical bed, examination table,
Or breasts on the asphalt.
or breasts. They're sacrificing their breasts to the asphalt. Which that's a little weird because asphalt kind of runs down the whole thing, but nonetheless, when we have to separate the two. We do have to recognize that when we put out hydrocarbons into the air, the exhaust and things like that, we are contributing to a measure of pollution. The question is, how much can the Earth actually take? And it's
I know that that's the question.
Well, more than we can ever put out.
What is reasonable to expect from your neighbor to mow or not mow his lawn on any one given day? It's like having a big loud party. You can have a party anytime you want, and you can be as loud as you want, unless you're so loud you're unreasonably disturbing the peace.
Okay.
So one guy mowing his lawn on an ozone day is not disturbing the ozone
It comes down to this. Whenever your society is more condensed, think major metropolitan areas where people are forced to live in confined places, they're going to respond against that.
To live
They do. But here's the thing.
Places.
What they do
they are not forced. I mean, that's not right.
I get that.
Okay, well, I'm not over it.
Right, but when they do, and for any number of economic reasons they call to, they want to start controlling how their neighbor lives because it's difficult on them or it's impacted. And this is why you've got more leftist type governments where people are more compressed together. They want to control each other, and they want to use government to do it.
We have a constitution to have rules so that we can agree on how we're going to get along. You don't just only have rules to control people.
Right.
So
your rights end where another's begin, and the left even tries to co-opt this by creating rights that don't exist.
Correct.
Like a right to health care, a right to internet, a right to murder.
These
rights don't exist.
And we have done a lousy job of explaining how that affects us and actually infringes on our rights by stealing our money, stealing our
imagine how.
Well, I live in a patio home neighborhood with small lots and less to mow, hallelujah. But anyway, my next door neighbor, shortly after I moved in, painted her house hot pink. Was I happy with that? No. Did it take away from... I felt like it took away from my neighborhood. Maybe it even took away from my resale value of my property.
They should have had a zoning officer bulldoze her home. That would have been fair.
But this is the kind of thing you run into. When somebody invests $250,000 or more on a house, all of a sudden they have interest, real monetary interest, in maintaining their investment. And if your behavior next door, if you got a meth house next door, that's going to affect
So,
them.
David, you agree with that?
What's that?
What he just said.
Well, that it does, yes. The question is, how much can you expect of your neighbor, rightly expect of your neighbor, on your property? And the answer to that is, in liberty, is none.
Well, what you're forced to share, such as the air around you.
But your resale value based on their choice.
Yeah.
No, you do not get that. You do not get that.
I'm aiming at you on your vaccination stance because this is the same concept. You're living in an area with people and they don't want measles. They want to vaccinate.
Well, okay, but
then they should vaccinate.
Well, no.
I want to mow my lawn.
Well, they can vaccinate. And if vaccinations is so great, then they'll vaccinate.
No, but you're polluting the air with your measles.
Then they should be also taking caution so that they are not exposed. Because there's a difference between exposure and infection. And if I am a carrier and an unwitting and unknown carrier, then I could easily pass it to any one of us because I'm
It
within
seems
range.
simple. All they have to do to
All you
prove the
have to do
harm
is
is
wear-
just prove that this person transmitted the measles
Well,
to you.
no,
That's
it
all.
goes
That's all
further
they have to
than
do.
that.
Are you the measles? Hold your
Tom,
hand.
it goes further than that, than just each person deciding, do I want the vaccine or not? It's when you say, you know, my kid's got some health issues, and I want to tap into what's called herd immunity. And so I want to make them vaccinate their kids so that I don't have to vaccinate my kids.
Well-
And that's where they use government, so the government decides which people are too fragile to be made to vaccinate,
Isn't it
and
amazing,
which
dude?
ones we're going to force to
And-
vaccinate.
They seem to take a minority of individuals and make rules for everyone based upon
Don't they
extreme
always?
minorities.
Yeah.
Whether it be 0.0013% of the population that's transgendered, with these pronouns, these restrooms,
Or kill
whether-
people with guns.
Whether it be this tiny, minuscule
Well,
proportion of the.
I'll tell you, I deal with it right now with my fellow mental health advocates. They want every health policy, which you write, to include mental health benefits or autism benefits or whatever other activist group says. Mandated must be included in that policy. And that's the problem, is the consumer should pick what they want to insure themselves.
Am I off on my analogy?
Or you would rather
How-
sell us a policy
how can,
that does
how
all
can
of
they
it?
predict the
I think you
ozone
should be
layer
required to
and
buy whatever
force
I'm
you
selling.
not to mow? It seems like you're in favor, David Older, of forcing people not to mow because the neighbor might have asthma, but you're okay with allowing some children not to get vaccinations because other people should just take care of
David
their...
has asthma. I don't think you understand.
Oh, no, I used to, but I don't anymore. Actually, I got rid of it.
but
And I can show anybody how to get
let's,
rid of it.
let's discover
right
yes.
now.
So let's discover that. Let's move from the air that we share to the watershed that we share. Should you be able to dump whatever down the storm
So
sewer?
we all know that's not... Yeah, we all know the answer
See,
to that.
but dumping in the air, how's that different from dumping into the water?
There's
Well,
more
That
air
would be
than
my
water.
question.
So then we should be able to vaccinate them.
Yeah, it's your right to
Wait,
vaccinate.
you have a right to vaccinate.
delicious.
What
you
I'm saying is
you
you
don't
can't-
have a right to force me to vaccinate.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Because
No,
you're
no, no,
dumping
no, no,
your
no.
measles
What if
in
you're
the
going
air.
to pump-
No, I'm
no,
sorry,
no.
but he didn't create measles. Measles is everywhere.
If you have
Well, I know
it,
that.
you're carrying
No,
it.
no. That's
Okay.
there's herein lies the
That
problem.
is-
One is created by nature or God
the act of God.
It's an act of God, if we will. That whereas dumping a poison in the water or into the air that you have created is two totally different things. The other thing is a exposure from an infectious organism is possible to protect yourself against. You can wear a mask. You can wash your hands. You can keep yourself from getting
Live
it.
in a hamster
But
ball.
you
No,
cannot escape the air you breathe
Okay.
and the water you drink.
Let me add to that before you respond to it, is take a whooping cough vaccine. You take the vaccine not to kill any whooping cough, but to keep it from causing the symptoms of you. And so when you are vaccinated, you are still a carrier and don't know it. Because
Correct.
you don't manifest it. And so when my kids would say, hey, our baby's coming, you want to go hold the baby at the hospital or the first few months, you got to have your whooping cough vaccine up to date. That was my kids' rules, okay?
Right.
I decided, yeah, I'll go ahead and do that for the sake of enjoying those first
Right.
few months with my granddaughter. All right, I got sick that weekend after I did the vaccine, okay? Never had that kind of thing before, but you know what? I chose that. That was my free will. Now, I talked to a vaccine specialist doctor, and she said, actually, you may have become an unwitting carrier in
Right.
that room. You didn't show the symptoms, so you thought you were fine. At least if you wouldn't have the vaccine, if you had whooping cough, you'd start showing the
Right.
symptoms, you would stay away.
Right.
There's the rest of it.
See, the thing is...
I caught into him. Can we?
No, go ahead.
No, I don't really see how it is different that if there are naturally produced waste products that you can't put upstream because it pollutes the river. And if the air is polluted by the mowing of the lawn, then we have regulations. So if the community, whether it's a city, a town, or otherwise, wants to enforce the regulations of vaccines, like what's going on in New York, I guess, I don't understand the difference.
It's an improper regulation. That's the problem. You're focused on the wrong point. If you want to say you can't pollute, that's one thing. So in other words, you can't pollute. You can't pollute with your infectious organism. That you can say, and that means you can't go around and try to infect everybody with HIV like people used to do.
Quarantines, right?
Well, you can have a quarantine.
Illegal in California.
It's a legal quarantine, right?
Okay, you could do things like that, but what the thing is that going to a vaccine is not ever going to fix it, because in part of what Dave just explained is that being an asymptomatic carrier, you actually can spread more. I mean, Typhoid Mary was an asymptomatic carrier of typhus. She did not know that she was carrying the typhus.
She was a real sport at a party, though.
But she was ultimately adjudged into permanent quarantine because she never could kick it. And she was an asymptomatic carrier for the rest of her life, and they put her into a permanent quarantine so she didn't continue to infect people. That is legitimate before the law.
Am I understanding your position on vaccines properly to say that you don't believe the government should be able to regulate citizens take vaccines? Is that correct or not?
That's not a regulation. That is an edict. That is a mandate, and no government can do that. You cannot dictate to that to me, because we're created equal, and those are fighting words. Okay, so
Justice Roberts disagrees with you.
Well,
you have to be able to
idiot.
prove that there is a harm, an actual harm, not a theoretical might become a harm.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. It's all theoretical.
Hold it back to my mowing of the lawn. Prove to me that my little lawnmower has an effect.
It's so loud, and it makes my nose run.
It doesn't.
That's what I'm saying. It doesn't have.
It doesn't. That's the difficulty, because it's so minute, so little. And they would like to, and they have not mandated that. I don't think in Tulsa you've ever seen people written a ticket.
Well, in LA you do.
Well, that's LA, and did you leave LA? Hallelujah.
Well, not LA, north of LA.
So I think our policy is, hey, please don't mow your, this is not the time, while the pollution and all these factors and the temperature, I think
it's the same thing with the vaccinations.
No.
That's what I understand.
No, you're a level away. There's me breathing on you, and then there's you forcing me to have a vaccine so that if I breathe on you, you think that I won't infect you.
Yeah.
And that's two totally different things.
Yeah,
I'm not allowed to breathe on you when I have
No, Tom, nobody's forcing you not to mow your yard currently in Oklahoma. Okay.
I think for the sake of this,
they may be
we
shaming you
that it's in LA.
Right.
Let's assume that they are.
For the argument, I'm following
I'm
Tom.
just talking about the consistency of the logic in regulation of the citizen.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, remember, regulation cannot be prohibition. Regulation is so that all can equally exercise their rights.
Okay.
That's what a regulation is about, to make regular our exercise of rights so that we all get along.
Okay.
And that's like the basic rules of the road.
Okay.
You're prohibited from driving on the left side, but you're allowed to drive on the right, and there is actually no inhibition to your commute. It's actually safe.
Yeah. I will agree that the seatbelt law is another over the top, because they're becoming
that is a dictate. That is not a regulation. So what's
the difference here?
Well, the difference is when it violates an individual right, an individual liberty outside of the due process of law. That is when you have a prohibition and not a regulation.
You said a dictate, not a regulation.
And a dictate means that you're going to get a fine for not wearing your seatbelt.
Yeah.
Well, wait a minute. It's my car. I can do what I want in my car. I'm not affecting anybody else, whether I wear a seatbelt or not.
Right. Yeah.
So therefore, they have intruded into my liberty.
Right. So we agree on that.
And so that becomes an edict, a dictate of a tyrannical authority on you, and that is what is forbidden under the Constitution.
And this is the difference between, let's make sure, because I think this is really the juiciest part. And people have really told me they enjoy learning about your constitutional edge about here. You're talking about the difference between an allowance or a prohibition. Am I correct?
No,
because do the road analogy again.
Okay,
you are
saying a regulation enhances a right. A dictate is prohibition. That's not prohibited. It's not permissible to say you simply can't do something that is a right. That's what is wrong. But a regulation is okay. You have to drive on the correct side of the road versus the incorrect side.
Okay, all right. I think I got you.
And so, in other words, a regulation allows everybody to do what they want to do. They're exercise their liberty.
And do it with more expediency and efficiency.
And
by
safety.
everybody keep to
For
the
the common
right.
good.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody gets there a lot faster.
Right.
Yes.
I know people are stopping at the red octagons, versus not.
Exactly. And that is the key difference, and I think what everybody misses, because what they tell you is this is regulation, but it's actually prohibition. And we need to learn how to discern and teach others to discern the difference.
I thought the teachers were supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Hey, we got about 10 minutes left in this exciting segment of 3D Politics. I'm Tom McKay, your host. I've got all three Davids, the Davids that matter here in Oklahoma, David Van, David Oldham, and David D'Ambroso right here on 3D Politics. We got about 10 minutes left to wrap up our hour. We're going to try to do this every week here on 3D Politics. And what else have we got?
Capitol. We just finished a session at the Capitol.
Tell us about it.
It's a big year. Well, one, we had lots of money this year.
Okay.
And that's not been
How'd
that way
that
for the last. It's the economy. Mr. Trump fan over
There
here
you
will
go.
probably say, we're making America great again. But nonetheless, we're on a good trend right now.
Right.
We're spending lots of money, and everybody's just content enough. So what's happened is our laws have been not so much focused on the budget and raising taxes. That's been a good thing, and everybody's really enjoying that. Now we're focusing on a lot of liberty issues. We've gotten a lot done this session. We've got permitless carry. Close enough, not quite the same as constitutional carry, but we'll take it.
Going in the right
Okay.
direction, yeah.
We've gotten a number of other things that what you guys say? What'd you pick up out of this?
I really like that law that forces insurance companies to conduct business with very small pharmacies. That was a cool law.
Yeah. Open trade. You can shop wherever you want, and part of me doesn't like that. No. Here's what it is, and this is very important here. You have things that you say, this is going to help the consumer. But when you're mandating somebody's behavior for your benefit, you're picking winners and losers. The government needs to stay out. So that's what's going on there. The chamber didn't like what the governor did on that. And that was interesting to see the big business groups, and the governor, I give him an A. I don't know what you guys score him at.
A++.
I'm giving him an A.
Okay.
He's doing fabulous.
Yeah, changing the mindset is as important as any of the technicals bills that they pass.
Yeah, no.
The whole attitude of the state is different since he's taken over.
Medical marijuana, everybody was expecting the worst because, oh my goodness, with the way the health department tried to kill it in the middle of the summer, what's the legislature going to do? And surprisingly, they really responded well. This is where the voters are leading the state rather than the lawmakers.
Yeah.
The criminal justice reform, we got a lot of things done. We decided that, if you didn't harm anybody else, you were just caught with half an ounce, that 5-year prison sentence was too much. So we said, how about a misdemeanor, up to 12 months in the worst cases.
Right.
And now we're making it retroactive. Well, if the governor signs it, it'll be retroactive, and then the guy who's still serving the 4th year of his 5-year sentence, we're going to commute that back. We're going to let the Pardon Parole Board handle all this so they don't have to retry the person or take it to the local judge. So that's another good thing that's coming.
But isn't this just going to encourage more people to do drugs?
You know, it's going to encourage people to get healthy.
If they legalized robbing a quick trip, I wouldn't do that either. Would this probably be called deregulation then?
No, this is
De-edict?
Yes.
Prohibition.
Yes, if you
it's not a liberty, although it looks like it, because it's a licensing on the medical marijuana.
It's a form of ending a prohibition, an illegal prohibition, but it is still prohibition because it's still in effect. We've got licensing. You have to have a license in order to escape it.
Prohibition.
If I was to carry,
Prohibition
and it's really not light because they've got even more edicts involved with the whole thing. There's more rules now than there were before.
Well, yeah,
and that really
Prohibition light.
It's
well,
for a handgun.
Well, anytime you say nobody uses it to. Under these conditions, you use it. Well, of course, you're going to have more rules because
you don't have to. We went the wrong way, but that's another.
I was just trying to clarify
week.
for the viewer what I think is a properly needs to be understood term difference. The difference between regulations and edicts. And the typical person will say in a situation like he's describing, we're doing all these things to deregulate, which is actually technically not what they're doing. They're de-edicting.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. That's a good point. Now,
de-mandating, de-prohibiting.
When we last
a lot of conflation.
Yeah, we took last week off. The week before, we were talking a little bit about this sex scandal that was being finally investigated, and they decided to do investigation light.
The only scandal, by the way.
The
sex scandal.
One victim. Now there's some others. And as a result of it, Friday, there was some things published and some mischaracterization by one particular blogger. And he doesn't like that I call him a blogger, but that's what he is. Citizen journalist, how's that? But he tries to make some money doing it. So anyway, that prompted Al Gerhardt this weekend to do a tell-all. And that tell-all is making a lot of people nervous right now, and it'll probably make a lot more people nervous come this next weekend when a lot more details.
Now, explain investigation light. What is that? What happened?
It means we're not going to listen to every testimony of everybody.
Now, who is this listening to limited testimony?
Well, unlike 2 years ago, where we actually had a House special committee impaneled, the Speaker hired a lawyer and said, you are our special counsel now. You do the investigation and give it back to me. And then that special, and this was to isolate and protect.
Mueller Jr.
Right. And unfortunately, it wasn't completely done.
She has the power to ask stern questions.
Yeah, and
for 10 days.
I did talk to some of the people who were investigated. They had a few things to say about the porno movie they were made to watch. And I haven't seen it. I don't know the name of it, but some people are the worse for wear of having seen it. Because
you have to ask Representative who?
Fedgatter, I'll tell you.
I hear there's a scene of a gal gluing her breasts to this thing.
Oh, I wish that were it, but it's not. It had to do more with defecation going on. But anyway, so now that you got that picture in your mind.
Thanks for that, Dave.
Yes.
Thank you, Dave.
So now here's the problem. The leadership is going to be exposed on this. Al Gerhardt claimed last night that he notified them last fall in October, and that they told him, wait till April to bring this out. And then in April, he was asked, aren't you going to bring that out? So that's when Al published. This is everything he's told last night. And now it looks like it was a deliberate attempt by the highest leadership to take out Kennedy at a very strategic time. And then they realized it didn't get them what they wanted for a number of reasons. And now Kennedy, to some people, feels inoculated. Okay? And you have either a weak leadership, a power-hungry Darth Vader up and coming, Kennedy, but you've got the largest freshman class we've ever had. And they can choose to go a completely different direction.
Now, these are ninth graders or?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking.
Laws out of the mouths of babes.
So we've got a mess right now, and they've all gone home.
I wouldn't say that having 45 freshmen is a mess. I think that's great news. I've always waited for the fresh blood to get there. With Stitt, I think they're going to be headed with the right morale, the right attitude.
This is the House and the Senate?
No, this is on the House side, yeah.
We're going to wrap it up. We're hitting an hour here on Facebook Live. We really appreciate you guys hanging out with us, whoever did.
Yeah. We do have one more thing.
One more thing.
And that is, this is Memorial Day. And these subjects that we're talking about is exactly what our founders and so many have died for. And we just need to take a moment to remember them and their sacrifice for us for these principles. And how dare us if we don't hold their sacrifice in good memory and secure for ourselves again the liberties that they have fought so hard.
In many countries, we can't argue about how to define freedom like we do in 3D politics.
Well, some lay down their lives, some lay down their breasts. But
everybody's a comedian. They told me I get to be the funny one.
Freedom for the entire world. Exactly. Yeah,
hey, that was just so
easy. Pass them up when you're that good. I'll train them well. All right.
This has been, and I'll add what David said, and we'll go over a couple of minutes. It's fine, but this is really the beacon of freedom for the entire world, the United States. And the reforms that we had here over 250 years ago have been copied all over what we call the free world.
Right.
And those men and women that die and pay the ultimate price for liberty, which is eternal vigilance and sometimes even your own life, they have given liberty really to the entire world. Mm-hmm. And without the United States of America, who knows where we'd be today, even in regards to technology. The internet would not be possible, perhaps.
You know what? They did it so we could get on here and broadcast everybody without fear of retribution, without fear that David won't talk to me anymore, without fear that Tom might discredit me.
It's free association.
Yeah, and the worst thing we could have is groupthink gone awry and turn into what you can or cannot say. And that's what they died for.
Right.
You can't be gulagged for your expression, for your opinions, for any of those things, for your religion.
Yeah. In the argument between socialism versus capitalism, our founding fathers raised the standard of living for all the proletariats across the world.
All humanity, exactly. That's right.
Yep. Tom McKay here with all three Davids. David Van, David Oldham, David D'Ambroso. I'm Tom McKay for 3D Politics. We'll see you next week.
All right. Thanks for joining us.